Hi, I came from the future. It's really different. There's a lot of exciting things happening. I get to see Mad Men before you guys do every week. Okay, well, I was trying to think about the future, and like we're living in the future all the time, but my main reference, when you're a kid, you don't really believe the future is going to happen. You don't really believe you're going to grow up, and it's very hard to grasp. And you have such a different idea of time passing. Like, you get excited for your birthdays, and then you can't, and you want to be older and all that kind of stuff. And I feel, but you don't feel like you don't feel the passage of time the same way. So I feel like when you're a kid, my idea of the future at least was all through movies and TV shows. That's what gave me. That's how I knew what the future was going to look like. And so I was trying to make a list of my biggest predictors of the future from my childhood, and which ones were the most accurate. This list is from the most accurate to the least accurate. So the most accurate, I think, was Quantum Leap. Which also, some of these seem like they're in the future, but they might have been present day. Everything seemed like present day, but they were the future. Like, I don't know, when he starts leaping, it could have been present day, and then he's leaping a lot to the past too, but this clearly, Ziggy lives in the future. And Ziggy, so Dean Stockwell has this little machine that he holds in his hand, and he talks to Ziggy. He talks to the boss, Ziggy, and he types in all this information, and then he types in words, and then information comes back. So obviously that's the iPhone. Like, Quantum Leap predicted the iPhone. And also, so that's very impressive. And Dean Stockwell was on Battlestar Galactica, and Scott Bakula was on Battleship Earth, which I've definitely never seen. But those seem like pretty. I'm never ever going to watch Battleship Earth either, but it probably takes place in the future. And so those seem like, not only did Quantum Leap predict the future with the iPhone, but it also told us that these two actors are from the future, like they actually are. And they made these documentary series later on with them, where it takes place in the real times. So that's the most accurate. And then there was this show, I'm not even sure if this was like a national show. I grew up in LA, suburb of LA, and there was a show, I feel like there used to be like Little Rascals on Saturdays and stuff here, so I don't even know if this was a show that was in the rest of the country. Maybe you guys are all from here, but there was a show, Out of This World, you know that show? That predicted Skype. Do you remember there was like this girl, and she has like a mom who's like a single mom, and somehow the mom met this alien dad that you never see. It's weird. I don't know how the mom met the alien dad. It's very sketchy. And then he's a cube. He's this cube on the table, and he like lifts, he talks, it glows. It's totally Skype, because it was affordable long distance communication for its time. So those are really good. And then this one again, I'm not sure if it seemed like it had to take place in the future. Small Wonder, right? I know it seemed like our time, but it was the future, because there was this girl who lived in the closet, which told us that R. Kelly was going to be trapped in the closet, which is ahead of its time. And I feel like all the signal, if you were to go back, Trapped in the Closet is weird enough, and Small Wonder is weird enough, that I bet if you were to go back, I haven't done this yet, I thought of this on the plane, but I'm going to go back and see how many things match up, because there has to be crossover, because she lives in the cupboard, and it's totally bizarre, and we all were so on board for so long, and it felt natural, same way R. Kelly's thing felt natural as soon as we heard it, like this is what we've been waiting for our whole lives, even though it makes no sense. And so, so those I think are the front runners, and then there's, and then some of the ones that you would think are the more obvious ones I think kind of suck at it, like Jetsons. Nothing, like maybe self-cleaning refrigerators we got, like maybe predicted that, but no jetpacks, no flying cars, and it didn't even predict that women were going to like be breadwinners. Like, I feel it was so backwards in what it was telling us the future was going to be, so that loses. And then Back to the Future is really confusing, because it's not about the future. There's just that one line saying Back to the Future, but they're in the past, and so that, I feel like I have to include that in the category, because it technically is the future. It's smart because it plays it safe, because it's saying it's a movie about the future that is just about the present and the past, so it can't get anything wrong. But I feel Back to the Future, even when I watched it, do you remember this scene when he goes into the diner and he says, like, I want like a Pepsi free, and he's like, you can't order Pepsi without, you have to pay for it, pal. They're like the grumpy waiter from the 50s. And then Michael J. Fox says, well, then give me a tab. And I remember being a kid in the 80s and being like, I'm calling bullshit on that because no one drinks tab. In the 80s. Like, it doesn't, like, it was so clearly like the writers just being like, this is such a clever play on words. I'm going to have him order a tab. And he never would do that. And then I looked it up, and the tab was popular in the 60s and 70s, and it died out in the 80s because of Diet Coke. So I was right. I don't even know, I've never met anyone who's drank a tab. I don't know what it tastes like. Band-Aids, maybe? Or nylon, like nude pantyhose. Like, it's just, the flavor, the name is so bland. But what's weird is that the name is so generic and horrible and makes me think of, like, the socks you put just on the bottom of your feet, and that's it. Like, it just is awful sounding. But the tab, actually, the name kind of came from a future machine, because how they named it was they asked a computer, like a giant IBM computer in the 60s, to pick a name, and it picked 250,000, it like printed out 250,000 different words that they had to choose from, like this crazy war game kind of computer that instead of like fighting, I guess, I don't know, they were like, we're not quite ready to go to war with this thing yet. Our first thing is gonna be naming this soda that no one's gonna drink. So it chose 250,000 words, and then they whittled it down to tab, which is, obviously tab was going to fail because the most boring people in the world chose it because they had 250,000 words to choose from. They're like, definitely tab. Tab sounds like a winner. And so I feel like they were really bad. That machine was really bad at predicting. And I keep thinking like 250,000 words, and it was 4-letter words. And then they took off the second B, and it reminded me of like, it reminded me of passwords, like when like they chose tab not knowing like maybe tab was a really exciting word back then. There were movie stars named Tab back then who I think were boring people. There's no way that it was ever, but maybe one guy was like, I predict that tab's going to be a really great word. And I feel like I was thinking about, you know how we pick passwords? Like the only thing that I think is worst predictor of a word for the future is our internet passwords. Like my password that I use for everything, you can't change them, right? You mess up. Like unless you keep really meticulous notes, you have to kind of keep the same password. And I feel every password I've chosen, like I used to choose like boyfriends' names, and that I was so wrong because I was stuck with this name that was wrong. Like it didn't accurately. It wasn't like a magic ball. It totally it predicted. You would think, judging from my password, that it predicted the future, but actually just predicted that I was like just going to be full of regret always. Like it's just this terrible thing. And then I had to move from that. And then I'm not going to tell you what my password is because it's the same one for every single thing. But it's from a reality show from a long time ago, and I can't believe I'm stuck with it. And it is so insane. And there's nothing I can do. Like I think about this. I have to like pretend like it's not actually part of my life. Like I type it in with my eyes closed. It's so painful. But you can't, I don't know how you're supposed to do otherwise because everything is going to keep changing. So there's no safe word. Maybe tab. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that might be the innocuous choice. So anyway, Back to the Future I think didn't do a good job with even of it predicting its own present because it was wrong about tab. The only thing I think it kind of got right was I like the way it talks about the feeling of being rubbed out of existence. Like when, you know, like Marty goes back to talk to make sure to, I forget what he goes, to escape the like kind of racist stereotypes, right? So then he goes back and he has to, he accidentally messes up his fate, makes his mom fall in love with him, and then he's got to make sure his dad and his mom get together so that he's stillborn. And there's this part where he puts his picture on his guitar, and then the more it looks like his mom and dad aren't going to be together, and you start to see his brother fade away, and you start to see his sister fade away, and then Michael J. Fox starts to fade away, and he gets all weak, and then Crispin Glover comes up and he kisses his mom, and then he gets all strong again. And I feel like that sort of predicted YouTube because seriously, because okay, this is I like my train of thought, but you're gonna have to like follow me in general. But I think I have a really good train of thoughts. I'm very impressed with my own mind, but you just have to pay attention. So do you know the Back to the Future was originally, when it wasn't Michael J. Fox, it was actually Eric Stoltz was the original Marty McFly, and he was so bad at it that they filmed like a third of the movie, and then they said no, he is so not what I was imagining, that they fired him, and then they refilmed the first third. But it's like a lot. It wasn't just like a screen test or the beginning. It was a lot. The whole first third with special effects and all that kind of stuff. And like the DeLorean part was filmed. And so then I think Eric Stoltz was like, well, he was probably really embarrassed and felt really bad and probably was like lashed out at his girlfriend that week and was really mean to people for a while. But then he was like, well, no one's ever going to see that footage. No one's going to ever see that how bad I was at it. Luckily, we can put that behind us. I can go do some kind of wonderful, and then I can kind of make a career in more talky films later on. He's like, it's all in our past. And then the internet was invented. And then YouTube was invented, and then that footage resurfaced. So we thought it had faded away, but actually nothing ever goes away because we know that, except for the only thing that goes away is like certain ex-boyfriends who I'm really looking for all the time. They have not surfaced yet on the internet, but most everything else is on there. And they were kind of losers, I think that's why. But otherwise, like everything else is on there, so I think that picture, Back to the Future, did predict YouTube in its way. And then it's right. I mean, solid argument here. and then the worst. So that's almost at the bottom. And then this movie that I was really obsessed with when I was a kid, that I definitely thought was absolutely the future, and turned out to be the most wrong, was Space Camp. Space Camp. I really loved Space Camp, and so Space Camp, maybe you guys haven't all seen it. It's Joaquin Phoenix's debut, but he was Leaf Phoenix then, and I remember reading this in actually Tiger Beat magazine, this whole explanation of Leaf Phoenix. He was his family, because he's River Phoenix's brother, and his family was River, Liberty, Summer, and Rainbow, and then Joaquin. And he felt really left out. He was the youngest one, and he was really upset that he didn't have a nature name like the rest of his weird showbiz family. And so then he changed his name to Leaf. And I remember reading this when I was little, holding Tiger Beat so close, my nose pressed against the page, and just devouring this bit of trivia. And so he was Leaf Phoenix in Space Camp, and he was fat. He was a fat kid, and he played you can kind of see it now. You can see the anger that he exhibits now is clearly his chubby kid past. But he, which I love chubby kids, but I'm saying it's there. Anyway, so in this movie, it's really weird. In this movie, he plays a child prodigy, and he showed up to Space Camp because he's so smart that he got to go to a camp. That's how smart he is. He got to sign up for a camp and attend with kids slightly older than him. That's his special genius ability. And he's 11, and everyone else is 15 to 18, and they're just well, he can't wait. He can't go with kids his own age. He's got to go with the teenagers instead. So he shows up, and then it's also Tate Donovan, who I once interviewed for This American Life, and he was Jennifer Aniston, and he was engaged separately in real life to Jennifer Aniston and Sandra Bullock at different times. I never understood why, and then I talked to him, and now I understand why. And then Kelly Preston was in it, and she had a glitter on her face the whole time, and Tristan Lottie, and then Tom Skerritt, who when I was little, I went through this phase where I decided Tom Skerritt was the ideal man. That was a really bad that was a bad future time for me. I actually remember sitting with a bunch of girls when I was 11 years old, and them going who's a really hot, cool grown-up, like at any time, like living or dead, and they were like, James Dean and Harrison Ford, and I was like, Tom Skerritt, definitely Tom Skerritt. He's the coolest, he is the ideal man. And this was not because I saw MASH. My parents weren't showing me. It was because I saw Space Camp and decided that's who I belonged with one day. And he'd also be the same age when I got there. Like but they all sign up. They're really good at, all of them love space. Kelly Preston is also a genius, which I feel like is cheating. You can't have two of those in one movie, but she is. And she chews her bubble gum, but she's a genius. And then Tate Donovan is not a genius, but his dad signed him up because his dad wants him to learn discipline by going again to this 3-day camp. And in order to get Tate Donovan gets a convertible if he goes to this camp, and he's really pissed off that he's got to go to the camp. And he goes there, and Leah Thompson is also in it. So many people. It's amazing. There should be a game about this movie. So Leah Thompson's in it, and she really loves space and really wants to be a pilot one day. And she studies really hard. She's like a Lisa Simpson type, probably what Lisa Simpson's based on, Space Camp. And she studies really hard, but Kristen Lottie, the teacher, does not let her be like the pilot. She picks Tate Donovan and says, you're the one who, I see something in you, and you're going to be the one. And it's kind of like, it's unclear whether who she's teaching a lesson, like is she teaching Tate Donovan a lesson or Leah Thompson. I'm not sure who she's actually trying to make a better person. I think somehow Leah Thompson, because she sees herself in her somehow. It's that kind of movie. So I make this seem like there's stakes involved, but actually this is all for a simulation. This is all Leah Thompson's so mad that she can't be the pilot of this simulation that they do for an hour. That's the whole point of it. They're not supposed to go in space. They're not supposed to, but there's a robot, right? And he's like this, I can't remember his name, Bing or something. And he's a robot, and he's like this little trash can thing that rolls around. He really looks like he was built from Radio Shack parts. It looks like they put all of the budget into going to Radio Shack and had the best. One guy got a really good commission at Radio Shack that day, and it's got those heavy caster wheels that you buy Office Depot desks are on. That's what he rolls around on, and he's totally a fake R2-D2. And he's got a little thing that comes up, and he and Lee Phoenix are best friends because obviously they totally bond. And it's this whole other plot. Everything is super real and sexual tension between everybody and grown-ups and Tom Skerritt. And then there's this separate plot of Lee Phoenix befriending a robot who's magic, actually a robot, not a robot who can think and feel that they came up with, and that's his plot. And then Lee Phoenix keeps saying he gets in a fight, and they tell him that he says he has no friends, and then he tells the robot he wants to go into space forever, and then they go into the rocket to do their simulation, and the robot has feelings, and he thinks, I need to send Lee Phoenix, who will one day be walking, I need to send him into space so that he can go and be walking Phoenix one day. And so he programs something, and then he sends them into space, and then it turns into this other kind of movie. Also Radio Shack effects, because it's you see them in the simulator, you see them in the spaceship, and then you see some footage from the 70s playing, and a smoke machine, and then they're in space. And then they have to figure out how to get down from space, and the oxygen's running out, and they're really stressed out, and Lee Phoenix goes out into space. They put him in a little, because he's the smallest, and they send him out into space, and he almost loses his tether line, and they have to but he's also made for $1, so this all happens on a very low budget. And still Leah Thompson's pissed off that she hasn't been pilot the whole time, and Tom Skerritt's down at command headquarters being we just sent a bunch of kids into space, and you're just that seems it would cost a lot of money, but then no one talks about that. It really is just the robot can do this thing and then send them up, and it gives you a really skewed perspective of economics in the 80s. So then they go into space, they get to the oxygen tank, they go back down. The movie, and they can't afford to have them do another scene where they come out. So the movie, you just see the jets go out, and then you see Tom Skerritt kind of give a high five to someone, and then it credits. It's amazing. I watched it recently, and this all happened. I'm very accurate in my description. Everything I just said is true. Nothing is wrong about what I just said. So this all happened, and I was like, when I was little, I thought, this is the greatest thing. I want all of these things to happen. I want to be every character in this movie. I want everything that happened in this movie to happen to me over the course of my life, at different stages. And then I end up with Tom Skerritt at the end. And I definitely wanted to go into space, and I wanted to have it goes without saying that I wanted to have a robot best friend, but we all wanted that. And this was like the best kind of robot. But I feel like I went through a lot of robots by that point, and like I was like, I didn't want Short Circuit. I didn't want Vicky from Small Wonder. I wanted this robot. Like, he seemed like the best one, very portable, and So then recently, this summer, I actually I was sent to space camp. I actually went to space camp, real space camp, adult space camp, which is a thing. It cost $500, which made me suspicious. But I was like, that must be because they haven't inflated the prices since the 80s. Like, they're just trying to. It's this time capsule of the past and the future. And so I went to adult space camp, and it's in Alabama. You're like, yes, of course, yes, I know it is. Have you been?
No, but
yeah. Alabama was not what I was thinking when I watched Space Camp. I didn't even know Alabama was a state when I was a little kid. So that was not what I was picturing. And so I go, and I'm really excited. And what I thought, Neil Armstrong had just died, and I was feeling very, very romantic about space. My Tom Skerritt crush had faded, and I don't know if I'd had a bigger crush on someone since Tom Skerritt as I had on Neil Armstrong, like the week after he died. Like, those stories were the greatest things. And I suspect he was a Republican, but it just didn't matter. It was I kept just being like, he was like Lincoln style Republican. He was like a Republican that didn't count back then. And every story is just so amazing. And I loved him, and I kept looking at the moon and just being like, oh, his footprint's up there. Or unless it's up there for me, and then I thought, like, I was thinking that, and I was even thinking, like, conspiracy theorists probably even feel something, like they're watching 2001 and feeling like the moon landing didn't happen, but they probably watched it furiously that week. Like, everyone felt something that week, I feel like, after he died. I loved him, and so I was really excited to go, and this is what I thought. I wanted to see who was going to go to space camp besides me. I wanted to know who these adult space campers were, and I really assumed everybody was going to be Leah Thompson. Like, everyone was going to be like people who maybe they'd signed up the night Neil Armstrong died. Like, maybe they just were like, oh my God, I always wanted to go to space. I'm finally going to do this. I'm going to go to space camp. But like, I thought it rekindled some like dying hopes and dreams, and the space program's not what it used to be, and I was just very romantic about what I thought about it going into it. And I get there, and so it's in Alabama, and it's also really hard the website is really bunk, and it's really hard. I should have been tipped off by that. Like, it's like the scheduling, the way they do the scheduling, it's like August 2012, and then like right below it is like 2014 and through like 18. Like, it's like if you do like one wrong drop-down menu thing too quick, you're already like in a different year, and it's really hard to. I thought that was just like, oh, they're so busy working on Space Camp that they don't have time to update the website. I didn't realize it was like a literal translate. I didn't realize it was a photograph of the place. Like, that drop-down menu was what the place looked and felt like. Like, it was so run down and not. I don't even think there was like a single authentic space artifact there. Like, it looked, a lot of the rockets looked like the ones that you ride outside of a supermarket. Like, it was just, like, really. And you had to, they don't give you had to pay extra to get a jumpsuit. Otherwise, they just gave you like a really cheap cotton t-shirt, like a hard cotton t-shirt. Extra large, like all the sizes were the same size. It didn't matter. Like, I would get a small woman's, and it was like the same thing as an extra large guy's. And it was such hard cotton on my skin, and like that really glossy kind of silk like that thing they put on it, like a sticker, and then you could buy a jumpsuit, and one guy bought the jumpsuit, and he wore it the entire weekend, like the entire weekend. And he was like, I think he was from Albany, and he had he didn't work in the post office, but he had that kind of job, and he wore it. But I did like him because it was like this bright blue jumpsuit that I never didn't see him have on, and then the rooms, you have your bunks, and they were honest. They were the bleakest. They were so bleak. Like there was no. I don't think there was a mattress on the cot. There were these hard metal bunks, and they kept being like, "This is to show you how they slept in the space." And I was like, "No. This is like the rooms of the subway that I see people like. I see maintenance workers like storing things in. That makes me sad for everyone's lives and jobs. Like it was so depressing, and obviously bright lights and hard bunks, and then there was no it was like a 3-day program, and I thought it was a no-brainer that you're going to get the anti-gravity, right? That right? You're nodding again. Yes. I mean, that's why you go. And I was like, I guess anti-gravity costs $500, like, or $100 if you, like, I didn't logically make sense, but I was like, there's no way they're going to say space camp and you don't get to go walk on anti-gravity. That didn't happen, not even close. And the only thing, my group, first of all, was full of, they were really old, everyone in my group. Like, I had this strange group, and that's fine, but they were like, nobody was there because they liked space. Like, I went one by one, not even the guy in the jumpsuit. Everybody went because they'd already gone everywhere else. But, like, not anywhere else. Like, they hadn't gone to, like, anywhere great. Like, most of them hadn't left the country, but they'd already gone, like, every cruise and, like, every amusement park and NASCAR. And then they were like, I guess space camp. Nobody had, like, a single story about, like, looking up at the stars when they were young or even, like, watching the moon landing. Like, nothing. And they believe these people were there during the moon landing. And nothing. There was just, like, I guess... And also, I thought everybody was going to I thought we were in a recession, and then I realized that I'm in a recession, but they're not. Like, they also, like, just had, like, they were like, we have $500 bills that we spend on these things. Like, no one seemed, I thought they had, like, squirreled away their money, and they were just like, we have to go and see the final frontier. No. They were just, some of them wanted, like, their wives wanted to send them away for the weekend. There was nothing. And my teacher later said it was the lamest group he'd ever seen. Like, the lamest space camp group. He was so exhausted, this guy. Like, he eye rolled his entire time through the thing. And there was, like, and, like, they were older and complaining. Like, everyone complained a lot. And there was, like, a time we had to go take a bus across the street once to, like, shoot off these bottle rockets, which was, like, the coolest part, but that was not about space. And we took a bus, and he said normally we walk, but I couldn't chance it, like, across the street. And there was, like, one time when I got to wear this spacesuit, but it wasn't anti-gravity. I had all these harnesses, and I was being dangled, and I got to do it. And I was like, I thought I was taking a turn, but he was like, you're the only one who would survive this. Like, there's no one else who can do this. And all this stuff, like, you went into, I think it was actually the same cockpit and stuff that they used from Space Camp, but it was also maybe the same, like the same props. Like, I think it was like the same pair of boots, like, that no one had worn since then. Like, everything was so nasty and dirty. Like, I think Tate Donovan took off his gloves, put them in a locker, and they're like, that's good, we can't buy any more from that point on. And so we wore all that stuff, and so there was nothing physical. There was a lot of, like, it was so embarrassing. Like, there's a pilot, the people who got to be pilots, they're always, like, gadgets and stuff, and they, like, oohed and awed over the like, the knobs and switches the way kids do. They were just, like, so dazzled by that. But again, everyone was pretty unenthused, but the ringleader of the unenthused people, there was this one woman who really, this woman, physically, she was actually not that old, and she wasn't, like, fat. She was the kind of body that, like, has missing a part, like a Fruit of the Loom body. Like, it's like a torso and legs. Like, and it wasn't fat. I swear, it was just like a thing, like a Fruit of the Loom. Like, there was a middle thing that was not there, and she was really cocky and wore shorts a lot and had seen everything and had gone on all the cruises and was constantly comparing Space Camp to this other stuff, and it really fell flat, but not for the reasons that I thought it fell flat, which was like comparing it to the glory, our highest moment as a nation. She was just like, she just didn't, mainly she didn't like that she wasn't in charge. She wanted to be in charge of everything. So when she wasn't picked for something, she'd be like, at NASCAR, I got to stand in the front row, and this didn't happen here. And she was always name dropping, but she'd name drop like people that she met at NASCAR, like in the audience. She was like a chronic name dropper, but like there was just no way. And then I was writing about it, and she tried to name drop me at one point. Not that she knew my name, but she just was like latched on, and I shut her down. Like she said, I want to tell my friend, I want to link to your article or tell my friends, and I said, no, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to ever speak about it. But so what was really, so she was always complaining, and what was, and she would not happy unless she was in a leadership position. And if she wasn't, but she was really bad at being a leader, obviously, and you have to show up and get assigned your ranks and stuff like that. Very much like Space Camp in that regard. Like there's someone who's just like, you get to be a pilot, you get to be a commander, you get to be a child prodigy, you get to be like the best friend of the robot. And she was the whole time talking about how she wanted to show up because she was mad that we get to do 2 simulations, and the simulations are just like, there's a pilot area, and then there's like a lot of jobs in the command room, the Tom Skerritt room, where you're just like looking at fake screens and pushing things and nothing matters, and you're reading from a book. But she was really mad that she had to be in that room last time because she wanted to be either the pilot or put in the harness, my harness, and she didn't know that the guy would have been like, he didn't want to go to jail, so she was really upset that because she kept saying she was so fit. And then she showed up late, and so she got a really bad job in the commander room, and she was really mad about that. And so we had to do this like 45-minute simulation, and while you're doing it, and you have this like binder, and you're reading all these coordinates, and nothing makes any sense, and we're not learning anything. I definitely got dumber doing this whole thing. Like I know so much less about space and even like office supplies, like from this being in this room. And so when you have headsets and you're reading these coordinates to each other. And this woman, while we did it, pulled out her plan book and started started making plans about her life, like pick up my son from soccer, do this, but she was doing it into the headphones, so the entire time while we were doing this thing, we could hear her just being like, 3 o'clock, okay, show up and buy some groceries, like the entire time for 45 minutes. And she kind of like throw name dropping things like to herself in there, and it was amazing. And everybody, the only time I bonded with anyone in that room was that one by one, we all stopped talking. We all looked at her, and there was this woman who was like really, really like a church leader, and she was so cheery and positive at everything. And at one point, we looked over, and she just like rolled her eyes, and like I started laughing, and I loved her for that because everyone was on the same page with this woman. And then so that was crazy, but it made me think. You know, it was a bummer. I was really sad about it because I felt not only did it ruin a really good movie for me, but it made me feel like there's not a lot to hold on to. Like if you can't have some sort of spark of hope or optimism at Space Camp, which was the embodiment of like what we once strived for in this country, like what is there left? And it also made me think that just like the power of someone being that annoying, how she can just like, how that seems to be so effective, that can actually rally the group more than like a good person. And I went home, and I've been writing a book for a long time, a really long time, and it's not finished, and I have a really hard time writing it, and it's become really confusing because now it's personal, and now I'm writing like about this past version of myself. And it's really weird. Like I find it, but I'm supposed to make it seem like present, and I feel like I'm different, but and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do about this. And the longer I spend writing this book, the more like I feel like all I'm thinking about is the future of when this book is done, and it makes me like very, very much not live in the present. Like to the point where like I'm just like one day I'll be able to go to IKEA and buy picture frames and frame the stuff that's been in my closet for 5 years. 'Cause I'm not allowed to go to IKEA until this book is done, and so like every single day I look at these like unframed posters and stuff, and I get really sad that I can't have art on my walls because I haven't finished a book. Like the spirals get really insane. And it's become harder and harder the more I go towards, the longer I spend in the present not achieving this future, and then having to think more and more about my past self and reconcile it with this present person that I am. Everything gets messier and messier. And I have this writing space that I use. It's all gonna, remember my train of thoughts? They're smart and good. So I have this writing space that I use, and I don't like it. And one of the reasons I use it, I rent like a cubicle in the future, New York. And one of the reasons I use it is because the people really irritate me. Like I know this is being filmed. I don't know what anyone's doing in there. I don't know what they're doing. It makes me I'm really not social there because there's no one I want to talk to. So it makes me feel like I'm forced, I'm both punishing myself because I hate going there, and I'm making myself work by having disdain for a lot of strangers. And so, but the more I spend writing this book, the more unpleasant it is to go to this space, because now the space is representing, like I'm afraid, I can't look at old emails for how long I've been at this space, because it would show me how long I've been writing this book, and I don't know how old my dog is. I got my dog around the time I sold my book. I can't look at emails that tell me how old he is, because I'll know I can't crunch the numbers to see how long I've been writing this book. I don't know how old, there's so many things that have happened that I refuse to acknowledge in the last 4 years. But anyway, so this writing space, there's one of the rules is that you can't eat in there. Like there's cubicles, and you can't talk in there. You can talk in the kitchen, but you can't talk in the cubicle area. And you can't eat because it's smells, and it's loud. You can't have meals. And they recently put up a sign saying there's an ant problem, so make sure you don't eat in there. That's fine. I'm fine with that. I don't want to hear people chewing their food either. But in the kitchen, where all the people I don't talk to are, there's a candy dish, right? And it usually has Tootsie Roll, cheap candy, like Tootsie Rolls and stuff like that. Almost always Tootsie Roll. That's a go-to one. Recently, they put lollipops out, those clear lollipops with crinkly wrappers. And I took one without really thinking. I'm not like I'm craving either Tootsie Rolls or lollipops, but you take it, and then usually with the Tootsie Rolls, I take them into the writing room, unwrap a few, eat them fast, it's done. I took a lollipop, and I went into the writing room, and I was sucking on the lollipop, and suddenly I felt this tap on my shoulder, and it was some horrible person, this stranger, who told me, this some woman, and she said, you can't eat here. The rule is you can't eat in here. And I was like, I know, it's a lollipop. And she's like, there's a sign and everything. You can't eat in here. And it was clear, I could tell in her head that the reason she was saying this because she thought she was writing something so good for Reader's Digest or something. And that I had interrupted her, I'd taken her out of her flow, and that was really important. And she decided it was worth interrupting whatever I was doing in order to put me in a bad mood and tell me I couldn't eat. And I was really upset. And I made a big show. I got all my stuff up, and I was fine. Because I was upset because I really principally believed that I was not eating food. I was eating candy that was supplied from the kitchen. And so I got my stuff, and this is not normally me. This is what this place is turning me into. And not having written a book, my book that I'm supposed to have done. So I picked up my stuff, and I went to another cubicle, really loudly, I have a Velcro, my computer case is a Velcro closure, and I Velcroed it up really loudly, and then I tried to sit down and work, but I couldn't do it, because suddenly I was Larry David. Suddenly I turned into this other person, and I went out into the kitchen, and there's an office where the administrative people are, and I asked I said, when you said no eating, does that include candy? I need to know if it includes candy. And the woman in the office said, no, we were not really being specific, but probably, no, it's fine. And I was like, thank you. And I didn't go back and tap the woman the horrible person on her shoulder. I just went and had a peace of mind knowing that I was right. And I sat down, didn't work at all. And then probably looked at Tate Donovan on IMDb or something, and then got up a little while later, and I noticed the sign, and something had written in Sharpie, no eating, including candy. And I was really, really mad. And so then I went back into the office. I've never talked to the office ever. It's next to the kitchen. The door's always open. I've never spoken to these people. And I went in and I said, I just need to know, did you put that including candy, or did someone else? And they said, well, no, we wrote that. And I said, but you told me a little while ago, like 2 hours ago, that candy was fine. And the girl looked at me and she like gave me this look that was, and she said, well, some people have been complaining. And the look she gave me was like, I would rather deal with you being upset than with this other person. This other person's more annoying, the other person's louder, the other person's more aggressive. She scares me. She's crazy. I'm going to appease her and not make you happy. And it reminded me, like, it was like the same, it was like a similar type of this space camp woman, I felt. Like, it was just like these people who'd kind of like, these irritants in her life who get their way. And it also reminded me of, this is kind of topical, but it actually reminded me of the gun control debate that happened recently. I'm serious. Because, you know, that gun control thing that happened was not, the majority of the country wanted it. And the majority vote got it, right? We voted, and the majority voted, but then the minority got a win. They got like 60-40, and the minority won. And so even though most people wanted it, the minority won, and the people they were appeasing, they were basically happy. They were more fine with letting the majority of us, rational folks, be unhappy than upsetting the crazy nuts, right? They were louder and, you know, make more appearances. And so that was the deal they struck. They're like, that's okay. We know that most of you are worried about your lives and your kids' lives, but we're just going to appease these people. And it really reminded me of that. And also, I want to point out, like, it is as irrational as gun control, this lollipop thing, because, you know, the lollipop thing, lollipops by definition, suckers require time to eat them. So it's not, I could not have even, there's no way I could have eaten this not in the work area unless I decided to talk to the horrible people. So like I feel like I was definitely logical. We're all logical about what we're trying to stop, and then it's always like people who are just like, no, we think it's really rational to put out bowls of candy that takes a duration of time to eat and then tell you that you can't actually take time to eat them. Like, I feel like that's what they're trying to say, and then the people in charge are like, yes, that makes sense. We don't want to hear it. Shut up. You're annoying. And so it makes me sad, and I was watching the press conference about when they gave after the gun control didn't pass, the latest one. And everyone, like, I've never seen a sadder one. Like, you see Obama and you see everyone's faces, and it's like a Newtown family and his guards, and Biden's up there, and they all look really sad. And then the one I watched, the camera zoomed in, and like just the background, you couldn't see anyone's face except for Obama, and you just saw like the frown faces. It was so sad. And Obama was talking about how this isn't over, we're still going to fight. And I was just like, really? Like, he was like, we're still going to call people and make sure that they uphold the law that we have. It was just so, I know I shouldn't give up, but it made me really, really sad, and really just like, what is the future? Like, what's going to happen to us? So then I was thinking actually about, so space camp, oh. Have I? I have no way to tell time here. I'm sorry. Really? Okay. I've gone 5 minutes long? I have 5 minutes. Oh, I haven't gone long then?
I'm giving you additional 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I was worried I was going to have too few things to say. And now I'm just chatterbox over here. But I'm so tempted to end on like, it's all hopeless, but I was trying to think of something positive. No, I was. And so then I was actually thinking, I did this other story about this, I don't know, I did it for This American Life, and it was a story about the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. And I went, and the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library is really crazy because kids can go and you can take these field trips. Little kids, like in elementary school and junior high, can take these field trips where they can be Reagan. You can like go to the White House and you sit at his desk, and there's this jar of jelly beans on the desk that you're not allowed to touch, and they tell these like little kids, and the little kids are like salivating, and they're just like, do not even think about going near those jelly beans. And there's 3 things. There's like a military room, and there's a press room, and there's an Oval Office. And some kids, there's like a random, like 4 kids a day get to be Ronald Reagan, and they have to decide whether or not to invade Grenada, which I'm not going to go into, but because I certainly didn't remember about what the details of invasion of Grenada until I went to this story. But they have to decide whether or not to do it, and they tell them that it's up to them. There's no wrong answer. And then one of the little kids I saw, this little really popular kid, obviously, I'm guessing, I know he's popular for a fact, even though he didn't tell me, but he was. He chose to invade Grenada, and then like there's like all these like these like kind of congratulatory dings go off, and like he's won a prize. And then later on, there was this very thoughtful kid who wore like a blazer who wore himself, his own field trip outfit, and he looked like Tom Hanks, like the character in Big, after he's become like an adult and goes back to being a kid. Like his suit looked so big on him, and he was so thoughtful. And he chose not to invade Grenada after hearing all these very logical things. And he when he did that, like this buzzer would go off. They'd be like, "There's no wrong answer," and then he'd say, "I'm not invading Grenada," and it was really sad. And this kid looked so struck, like he was just so devastated that he had put people in danger, and he was a vice president that he would consult with every single time, and that wasn't part of the rules. But there was this little girl that I think he had a crush on, and he would just be like, "What do you think, Lady Vice President?" It was really cute. But these kids actually gave me a lot of hope. And I was thinking, like, you know, I went to one place, and it was a bunch of adults trying to recreate this vision of the future that they had from their past. And I went to this other place where it was a bunch of kids learning from the past and then applying that to the future. And those kids were a lot more hopeful and had much sounder judgment than the other version, and I feel like that is the way it should be, right? We should learn from our past, and not from these futures that we thought was going to happen.